Camas Prairie is distinguished by a number of unique ridges that have the form, structure, and arrangement of ordinary ripple marks but are so large that the term ripple mark seems inappropriate. It is retained, however, for want of a better one. Except for a few inconspicuous ones below Big Creek Pass, the ridges are grouped in belts appended to the other three northern gaps, namely Duck Pond, Marco, and Wills Creek. The locals call it Marco, so I call it Marco.
Okay.
A relationship suggesting formation by currents entering the basin through those channels. The ridges range from 1 foot or less to 50 feet. That's a 5-story building in amplitude, and from a few feet to as much as 500 feet in wavelength. So here's Camas Prairie. Here's the Marco Hills. Here's the 3 passageways that it referred to into Camas Prairie. There was one diversionary passage through Rainbow Lake Pass here, and then the main discharge outlet was here to the south. So here's current ripple sand deposited on the floodplain of South Fork Peachtree Creek after Hurricane Ivan flooding. The floodplain is now occupied by Medlock Park. It had been decades since any flood had overtopped the modern banks of the creek. But this hurricane that came through, the creek, which is over here in this brush, rose up out of its channel and spread out over the modern floodplain and deposited this layer of sand. And so here you can see measuring tape shows the chord length and the amplitude of the ripples. Now, I was able to look on trees and nearby buildings and determine the high water mark. There was a high water mark on the buildings. It was just almost 24 inches above the ground. So you had a flow of water from right to left. Yes, from right to left. And you can see the chord length. There's 2, there's 5. So 3 inches, typically, chord length. Amplitude, about 3/4 of an inch. So this is water 2 feet deep. Now, as we're looking out, Camas Prairie, we're looking out. You don't see them that well here, so let's find a better view. Let's see, Highway 26 crosses the view. Here's Highway 26. This is a farm here. So the water coming from the north spills over the hills. Here's a huge fan delta. Now you can see ripples coming out this way. You can see, in fact, you can look at the ripples, and the ripples diverge from each of those 3 outlets that we saw. Duck Pond Pass, Marco Pass, and Wills Creek Pass. Mm-hmm. So look at the size of these ripples here. You had a secondary ripple train here and another ripple train over here. So here you have a fan delta, and then you can see the ripples. See the ripples?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the floor of the valley. Look at the floor of... So this is what Prairie discovered and wrote about in his 1942 paper, was the presence of these giant ripples.
And what is the amplitude of those?
Well, they're up to 50 feet high.
50 feet high. Oh, wow.
Yes,
okay.
50 feet. Yeah, 50 feet. Well, yeah, let's see. What are we looking at here? Well, yeah, I mean, this thing here, that's the height of a 5-story building right there.
Oh, my gosh. So 3/4 of an inch, if we wanted to scale this up, 3/4 of an inch is based off of a 2 foot deep water.
Well, I can tell you how deep the water was through here. So let's see what your calculation comes up with. Well, the floor of the valley is right at about 2,800.
Okay.
Remember the high water mark?
Yeah.
42?
4,200. Yeah.
So 1,400 feet deep.
Okay, so close, but not
close. Yeah.
Yeah.
1,400 feet deep. 1,400 feet deep.
Oh my gosh.
Now, at this point, the valley is 5 miles wide. So imagine a river 5 miles wide, 1,400 feet deep.
I can't.
Well, this is why Prairie saw this, what we're looking at right here, and called them unusual currents.
Now I'm getting why they were so unusual.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you have to kind of stick with the story a little bit to start really putting the pieces together and getting the big picture. Yeah, so this is aerial shots that I did probably, I don't know, early 2000s, I guess.
There's so many different examples is what we're going through of the scale of this.
This is looking north. So there's your big fan delta right up there. So that's the stuff that's splayed out from, I think it's from Marco Pass. And here's looking down on the fan delta, and you can see, look what's on its surface. Okay, so view south over the Wills Creek Deltaic Bar. State Route 382 is visible across the upper right-hand corner. Oh, okay, so that's this up here. And this is a farm, you can see right here. There's a farmhouse there, a 2-story farmhouse, which is kind of lost in the whole landscape. So this is the composition of a Camas Prairie ripple. Now, do you remember imbrication? Did we talk about that? The tilting of rocks. This is imbrication, where you see the tilting of the rock. Here, the tilt is in the direction, the downflow direction. So you're looking at a cross-section of a big ripple here. This is at a road cut. And flow is from right to left. So here we are looking west. Here's the Marco Hills. And, I want to call your attention to this feature right here. That's Rainbow Lake Pass. And you can see Rainbow Lake Pass is higher than the floor, where the ripples are. Water flow is from right to left. Okay, like this thing right here, this is a huge fan delta splayed out from one of the passes. That's probably Marco Pass. Then there's another one here that's highly eroded. But Rainbow Lake Pass, I think we've got the next one. There's Rainbow Lake. Looking east, current flow was toward the viewer. All right, so here we go. So here's Rainbow Lake and Pass from the air is viewed to the northwest. The lake elevation in the pass is 3,590 feet. Right up here is 4,460. So if we go 4,200 minus 3,590, we get 600. So the water at its maximum was 600 feet deep moving through this pass. Then as the water level dropped in Camas Prairie, then you can see that the floor of this was above the floor of Camas Prairie. Right? What did I just say here? 600. So 700, it's still had to get down. It was 1,400 feet deep. So right here it was, say, 600 feet deep. So that means once it had dropped to where the water was 800 feet deep in Camas Prairie, then this would have been isolated. It no longer would have been a spillway. It only was a spillway when the water rose up to 4,200. And it undoubtedly cut a lot of material out of here. But once the water level dropped and was below 800 feet deep, then this was left isolated. And the flow through Rainbow Lake Pass would have stopped at that point. And all of the flow out of the basin would have been through that southern outlet. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So at its peak, it was like 600 feet deep through here.
Oh, my gosh.
And here's 4,200. That line represents 4,200 feet. So there you can see over here, that would have been 600 feet above the floor of Rainbow Lake Pass, and then it would have been another 800 feet down to the floor of the basin.
Yeah, I see.
And that would have been... Yeah, Rainbow Lake Pass exhibits strikingly the effects of a former large and rapid westward flowing current. Above the lake, the floors of both branches have been severely scoured, exposing the bedrock, which remains bare. The floor is furrowed with channel depressions, several of them holding ponds or marshes. Upstream angles of prominent knobs are slightly rounded as by water. These features apparently were formed by a huge current swinging from side to side as it moved swiftly through the pass, eroding the outsides of bends and depositing gravel bars on the inside. A huge current. I mean, can you imagine a huge current 1,000 or more feet deep? And here I've done the elevations of the floor. And then National Bison Range, what do you see? Shorelines, strand lines.
Yep.
Prairie calculated through, this is in Eddie Narrows right here, he came up with slightly more than that. I'm sorry, slightly more than half. So his was about 9.5 cubic miles per hour. Now, if you look at this, you can notice something. You go up, you've got the sheared rock faces, then you get up here and you've got full, thick forest growth.
Mm-hmm.
This is the high water mark right here. So this is where the water reached. And everything below is just scoured, sculpted rock with little patches of greenery, of trees sort of but then above you can see the full forested area. So that's your high water mark right there at about 4,200 feet. And then as you go through, cliff face along the north side of the Clark Fork River, scoured and etched by the Missoula flood. Flow was from right to left. Cliff face along the north side of the Clark Fork River, scoured and etched by the Missoula flood. Flow was from right to left, and just for scale, you see the little guy standing there.
Yeah.
So look at the face of this rock. This is not smooth. This is etched, scoured. This is scoured. That would be the word. Flow right to left. So this is you learn to look for things like this. Tracing this out. Clark Fork River and Valley near the supposed location of the interface between glacier ice and Lake Missoula. Now, remember the discussion about the main valley and trunk valleys coming in and backwash moving up the trunk valleys? So one of the valleys, tributary valleys of on the Clark Fork, that's where this is. So we were able to go up. So Clark Fork is down here. So imagine you've got this big backwash, almost like a tidal bore, coming up this way through the tributary, and then it backfloods, and this is its deposit it left behind that I'm standing on when I took this picture. So this is from above. So this is where we're able to go up the tributary valleys, find the depositional evidence that was how far it got, backflooding up the tributary valley. Then it turned around and flowed back out. So this is from below looking at it, and this is standing up on it. And then other tributaries have finer grained stuff like this. White Pine Gravel Pit. You see the man standing here for scale. Now what's interesting about this, if you'll notice that the strata you see here, they're sloped. They're not flat. Remember now, when you have this kind of deposition, what are called foresets, the downslope is in the direction of the current. Mm-hmm. So current here was from right to left. See the tilt?
Yeah.
Okay, now here was, this is Roy Breckenridge. Now notice this is 1989. So I had this field trip guidebook when I went out there, and I interviewed him in 1998, right? He had written this paper. He says, the White Pine Gravel Pit is located approximately 3 kilometers south of Highway 200 on the White Pine Creek Road. The deposit is about 100 meters above the valley floor, so about 330, 340 feet. The gravel pit presently exposes over 50 meters of gravel section. This feature is located at the mouth of the tributary valley and trails southeast from the valley side in an opposite direction to the present Clark Fork River, and the flows emptying Glacial Lake Missoula. Directional indicators show that the feature was deposited by currents moving in a southeastward or up valley direction. Now, what's the significance of that?